Hello, and welcome to Algebra 1 SOL Prep Week 13, Direct and Inverse Variation. Direct variation, the equation looks like y equals kx. And if we solve for the constant of variation to get the k by itself, we have to divide by x to move it away. So k equals y divided by x. Because this is very much like y equals mx plus b, but of course just the y equals mx part, if we were to look at a graph, the graphs of direct variation are always a straight line that go through the origin. Has to go through the origin because since we don't have plus b, the b is 0. So it starts at the origin. All of the graphs of direct variation start at the origin and then are straight lines. That's important to remember for questions like example number 1. Point A is an element of direct variation. So if it's direct variation and we have a graph, we know the graph has to go through the origin. So I'm going to plot the origin as a point in this graph. It says plot 2 points other than A that are elements of this direct variation. Well, of course, the origin has to be one of them. The coordinates of the points must be integers. When it says integers, that just means it has to cross on one of these grid lines. So we'll make sure to say that it touches the grid lines to help us remember this. So looking at A and connecting to the origin, we see that the slope is 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going up 4, and then we're going over to the right 1 unit. So I can find another point by doing the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1 unit. So there's another point. I could plot more, but they just said plot 2 points other than A. So I've done that. One was the origin, and one was the other point after I used the slope. Number 2, which graph represents direct variation? So remember, direct variation has to go through the origin. This one does not go through the origin, since the origin's down here. This is the only one that goes through the origin. So C is the correct answer. Notice the origin is not on the line in the other two graphs. Number 3, which equation best represents the direct variation shown in the graph? So notice because it's direct variation, it's going through the origin. When it's direct variation, we remember that it's going to be like y equals mx plus b, but there is no plus b. We never pick any equation with a plus or minus. So I see a plus here, it cannot be choice C. Also, it has to look like y equals mx without the plus b. So I don't want a variable that's divided. So choice B cannot be because a variable is divided. So it's either this one or this one. Now remember that m is like the slope. So I should count the slope by looking at the rise over the run. Notice in this graph, I will go up 20 and then over 2. So the slope is 20 over 2, which is 10. And this one has that slope, y equals 10x, or because we're using w and h, w equals 10h. Number 4, Alina earns $50 for every 8 hours of work at her job. If her earnings vary directly with her work hours, what is the constant of variation k? So remember, direct variation is like y equals mx, but we often use k instead. So if she earns $50 for every 8 hours, I'm going to put 50 and 8 into the two variable spots. And then I'm going to divide to get the k by itself. So I have 50 equals k times 8, divide both sides by 8, and k equals 6.25. So it's important to remember the direct variation equation is like y equals mx, y equals kx. Number 5. It took Martha 120 minutes to make 15 hand-painted posters for her club by herself. How many people, all working at the same rate as Martha, would it have taken to get the same job done in 40 minutes? So notice it took her 120 minutes. So in this situation, we're thinking that if there's going to be more people, what's going to happen to how long it's going to take? That's right, it's going to take less time. So while the amount of people goes up, the amount of time goes down. And when things work in opposite directions like that, see these are opposites. Opposites make us think of inverses. And that is inverse variation, moving in opposite directions. Unlike direct variation, direct is another way to think of same, moving in the same direction. Inverse variation, we kind of think of opposites. So we're going to set up an inverse variation equation, y equals k divided by x. This is the equation for inverse variation. Now, we're talking about getting the same job done. So the fact that it's 15 hand-painted posters doesn't really matter. What matters is that it took her 120 minutes. So that is the rate, the same rate. Rate is the k. So k is 120. So using our inverse variation equation, y equals 120 divided by x. So if we want the job done in 40 minutes, y equals 120 divided by 40, that makes 3. It will take 3 people to get the job done that Martha did. Number 6, if x varies inversely as y, so first of all, I see inversely, and I want to think y equals k divided by x. And if x equals negative 30 when y equals 5, so this information helps me find the k. What is the value of y when x is 6? Let's use this first information to find our k. So the y is 5, and the x is negative 30. To solve for k, I multiply both sides by negative 30, and k equals negative 150. So my equation is y equals negative 150 divided by x. What is the value of y when x is 6? So I'll plug the 6 in for x, and negative 150 divided by 6 makes negative 25. C is the correct answer. Number 7, write which table represents direct variation and which table represents inverse variation. So for direct variation, which is y equals kx, to get to the k, we have to have y divided by x. Inverse variation, which is y equals k divided by x, to get to the k, we have to multiply y times x. So if we're looking at values of x and y, I'm going to divide them to see if it's direct variation. I'm going to multiply them to see if it's inverse variation. So I'm going to do y divided by x over here for direct, and x times y over here for inverse. Let's start with y divided by x. So negative 6 divided by negative 10 makes 3/5. Negative 20 divided by negative 3 makes 20/3. Those are not the same, so it is not direct variation. But if I multiply them, negative 10 times negative 6, that makes 60. Negative 3 times negative 20, that makes 60. 2 times 30, that makes 60. And 5 times 12, that also makes 60. So since multiplying them gave me the same value every time, this table is inverse variation. Let's try the next table. I'm going to divide for direct. 8y divided by x. 8 divided by 120 makes 1/15. How about 6 divided by 90? 6 divided by 90, that makes 1/15. 4 divided by 60, that makes 1/15. And 3 divided by 45, that makes 1/15 also. So because dividing gave me the same for each one, direct variation is the correct answer for this one. How about in this one? Well, if I want to divide this way, which might be easier, 8 divided by 4 is 2, 10 divided by 5 is 2, but 12 divided by 24 is 1/2. So it is not direct. If I multiply, 8 times 4 equals 32, but 10 times 5 equals 50, so it's also not inverse. So this one is neither. Last one to check. 3 divided by 1 is 3. 4.5 divided by 1.5 is 3. 21 divided by 7 is 3. And 28.5 divided by 9.5 is 3. So this one is also direct variation. Hope you had fun. Enjoy the practice.